After years of waiting, years of theories, and a production cycle that felt like it spanned a decade, the curtain has finally closed on Hawkins, Indiana. I'm sitting here looking at my notes, looking at that final frame of the finale, and I'm struggling with this very specific, very heavy feeling. You know that sensation when a party goes on just an hour too long? The energy is dipping, the jokes are being recycled, and you start to realize the magic of the early evening has evaporated into the morning light. That is Stranger Things Season 5 for me. It's a season that arrived with the weight of the world on its shoulders, promising a definitive, world-shaking conclusion to the Netflix flagship. But what we actually got was something much more complicated and, frankly, much more frustrating. I wanted to love this. I went in expecting to be surprised, as this show often does when I count it out. But as the credits rolled on that final episode, I felt less like I'd witness a grand finale and more like I'd watch a show succumb to its own massive, bloated gravity. We're now in 2026 and the Duffer Brothers have finally delivered the end. But did they actually stick the landing, or did they just trip over the finish line? We're talking about massive kaiju battles, psychic awakenings that feel like they were pulled from a different show entirely, and a level of character bloat that would make a late-era Marvel movie blush. Today we're going to pick apart exactly where the Upside Down went right and where it finally fell apart. Volume 1 kicked off by essentially kind of hand-waving the massive world-ending stakes of Season 4's finale. Remember those giant world-splitting cracks? Well, the show decided to just slap some metal sheets over them and move the clock forward 19 months. We find Hawkins under military quarantine, a town transformed into a base camp for Dr. K and Lieutenant Akers. The vibe shifted immediately from the intimate small-town horror of the early years to a grand, sprawling military sci-fi. Our core group is scattered. 11 is in hiding with Hopper and Joyce, while the older teens, Steve, Nancy, Robin, and Jonathan, are running a pirate radio station, WSQK. It's a cool setup on paper, using the radio to coordinate crawls into the Upside Down to hunt for Vecna, but the execution felt oddly detached. The emotional catalyst for the season arrives when Holly Wheeler, now a much more central figure, is abducted by a creature she thinks is her imaginary friend, Mr. Watson. This is, of course, Henry Creel, and it's the first sign that the show is pivoting toward a younger protagonist to mirror where the original cast started back in 2016. Volume 1 builds toward a massive revelation of Will Byers finally unlocking his own psychic abilities to save the group from a Demogorgon attack. It was a moment fans had been theorizing about for years. In the context of the season's pacing, it felt less like an organic payoff and more like a break the glass in case of emergency plot device. Then Volume 2 hit on Christmas Day, and the momentum just kind of stalled. It felt like a loop of planning, failing, then pivoting to a new plan to fix the previous failure. The tension was constantly undercut by this weird two-scene writing style where the characters spent more time explaining what was happening than actually experiencing it. This brings us to the microscope moment, the finale. The final episode attempts to weave together a dozen different threads, and we're introduced to a lot of these different elements, like another world on the other side of the Upside Down, the Abyss, which feels like unnecessary complications introduced far too late into the game. The plan is for 11, Max, and Callie, who was brought back just to serve as a sacrificial lamb, to enter Henry's mind while the rest of the group attacks the physical manifestation of the Mind Flayer in the real world. 11 and Will eventually impale Henry in a moment that should have felt like the ultimate catharsis for the Byers boy, but it was overshadowed by the sheer noise of the production. The actual death of Vecna comes not from a grand psychic blast, but from Joyce Byers bludgeoning him with an axe and decapitating him. It's a brutal, visceral moment that feels like a callback to the show's slasher roots, but it sits awkwardly alongside the CGI-heavy monster fight happening elsewhere. When the dust settles, the Upside Down is detonated, and 11 makes the choice to stay behind, effectively sealing the rift from the other side. This is the setup versus payoff problem. We spent 5 seasons building 11's humanity, her desire for a normal life, and her relationship with Mike, only to have her arc end in a self-imposed exile that feels more like a plot requirement than a character-driven choice. The episode then jumps 18 months into the future. Life in Hawkins has returned to a surreal kind of normal. Hopper and Joyce are finally looking toward the future together, and the original party is graduating high school. The final scene where Mike creates this story of Eleven possibly escaping and creating a new life for herself after playing the final game of Dungeons and Dragons, it's undeniably the strongest part of the entire season. It's quiet, it's bittersweet, and it leans into the nostalgia that made the show a phenomenon in the first place. Mike's theory that Eleven is still out there gives the ending a glimmer of hope, but it also highlights how much of the preceding 10 hours felt like filler. Did they stick the landing? In the final 5 minutes, I say yes. They found the heart of the show again. But in the episodes leading up to it, the landing was a mess of explosions, secondary characters we didn't have time to care about, and a fundamental lack of stakes. The death of Callie felt hollow because she'd just been absent for 3 seasons. She was brought back specifically to die so the main darlings could remain safe. In doing so, it lost the edge that made the first season's masterpiece of genre fiction. Every time a new season of Stranger Things rolls around, I walk in with my guard up, expecting to be disappointed, and usually the Duffer Brothers manage to pull a rabbit out of the hat. Season 4, in particular, really won me over. I love that it leaned so heavily into the Nightmare on Elm Street aesthetic. It was dark, it was focused, it felt like it had something to say about trauma. But when I saw the trailers for this final season, I felt a pit of my stomach. I was pretty underwhelmed. It looked too grand, too shiny, too marvelly. I kept hoping they'd prove me wrong, but having sat through this entire season, I have to be honest with you, this is a letdown, and it hurts my sci-fi, nostalgia-loving nerd heart to do it. The problem started almost immediately with Volume 1. It felt like the writers looked at the devastating high-stakes ending of Season 4 and decided it was too much work to deal with. They retconned the hell out of that finale, literally slapping metal sheets over dimensional rifts like they were fixing a leaky pipe in a basement. Then we get a Rockin' Robin exposition dump. Look, I love Maya Hawke, but having her character spend 5 minutes catching the audience up on the last 3 years of a real-world wait felt like lazy writing shortcut. It was cringy, it was fourth wall breaking in all the wrong ways, and it set a tone of, let's just get to the good stuff, without actually earning the journey. The first volume had moments of promise. The kidnapping of Holly Wheeler was a genuine shock, but the resolution of that volume with Will suddenly manifesting psychic powers felt less like a natural evolution and more like a piece of fan fiction that somehow made its way into the official script. It's the kind of things fans have been writing on Tumblr for years, and seeing it play out on screen felt weirdly unearned and creatively bankrupt. The cast has become so bloated that the show treats every character like they're an untouchable darling. When you have a cast of 20 people sneaking around on a military base, and the only people who die are the ones we met 5 minutes ago and the ones who haven't been on screen in years, you lose the horror part of your sci-fi horror equation. Take a look at Welcome to Derry, the It prequel show. I honestly thought the show was going to be the inferior Stranger Things clone, but it actually had the guts to do what the Duffers wanted. They introduced a new losers club in the first episode and basically wiped them all out. You were constantly on edge because you knew anyone could go at any time. In Hawkins, everyone has plot armor thicker than a tank. It's clearly written for people who have a parasocial relationship with these fictional characters rather than people who want a tight, dangerous story. And then there's Linda Hamilton. How do you get the legendary Sarah Connor into your 80s inspired sci-fi show and give her absolutely nothing to do? She was the weakest 80s icon character in this series' history. She just kind of disappeared at the end. It's a waste of talent and a waste of our time. The whole season felt like it was just checking boxes. Will's powers? Check. Steve and Nancy closure? Check. Every ending wrapped in a neat little bow? Check. Promoting Holly Wheeler to a lead felt like a desperate attempt to recapture the kids on bikes magic of season 1. Then they paired her with Derek, a character whose only personality trait is saying, suck a fat one every 10 minutes. It's a blatant t-shirt bait, and it's exhausting. It felt forced, it felt safe, and for A show that started as a gritty homage to Spielberg and Stephen King. Safe is the worst thing it could be. However, I gotta give credit where it's due because the very end of the finale actually worked for me. Eleven's ending, choosing to stay in the upside down protect her friends, felt right. It was the only part of the season that felt like the Stranger Things that I loved. That final scene with Mike, the graduation, the bittersweet realization that their childhood is truly over, that kind of hit home. It should have been the focus of the whole season, honestly. If they had narrowed down the scope and cut half the cast and focused on Eleven and Mike's relationship as the core anchor, we could have had a masterpiece. Instead, we got a kaiju battle that felt like a deleted scene from an Avengers movie. Was Stranger Things Season 5 worth the wait? I think this season is a classic case of a show becoming too big for its own good. It starts with the massive retcon of Season 4 and ends with a kaiju battle that feels more like Marvel than Milton. The cast is way too bloated, the stakes are non-existent because nobody important is ever in real danger. And the new characters like Derek and his suck a fat one phrase are just t-shirt bait. Even an icon like Linda Hamilton is completely wasted here, but it's not all bad. The final 10 minutes are some of the most emotional, bittersweet television I've seen in years, focusing on Eleven and Mike in a way that the rest of the season seemed to ignore. It's a messy, filler-heavy final season that loses the horror roots of the show. It manages to stick the emotional landing just enough to make you maybe cry. So I'm giving this a disappointing 2 out of 5 stars. Binge it for closure, but don't expect the magic of season 1. And that's a wrap on Hawkins and maybe our monoculture. But I want to hear you in the comments. Was I too harsh? Did the kaiju fight give you chills, or were you like me, just wishing they'd pick up an axe and get back to basics sooner? And what's your theory on Mike's final monologue? Let's keep the discussion going, but keep it civil. We're all friends at this dinner party. If you enjoyed this review, hit that subscribe button and subscribe to the cult. And maybe hit that like button too, that really helps. Until next time, keep watching the skies, keep your walkie-talkies charged, and stay strange.